So-called renewable energy is anything but renewable. Not only is it unreliable and intermittent because the sun doesn't shine at night and the wind frequently doesn't blow, but it also requires massive amounts of infrastructure to connect it all together. Unlike a nuclear or coal-fired power station, which is built in one single location and has a relatively small footprint, which can be easily connected to the grid via a single interconnection, renewable energy is scattered over the landscape, often for hundreds of kilometres. In the case of wind turbines, these have to be located on the bleakest and most remote areas of the country to get the most wind. And solar panels can take up acres and acres of land. All of this needs to be connected together, adding vast complexity and cost to the grid. And as usual, governments were hell-bent on building wind and solar, but didn't think about how to connect it all together. Typical. Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney-based YouTuber. If you'd like to support this channel and display your anti-EV credentials to your Tesla-owning neighbours at the same time, why not buy some awesome MGUY merchandise, like this mug, this baseball cap, or this t-shirt. Each high-quality item sports the MGUY No EVs sign, and they're all made to order, perfect for irritating the hell out of your local EV zealots. Visit store.mguy.tv or click the link in the description to check out the full range of products. And of course, you can always just buy me a coffee. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. You know, it never ceases to amaze me how governments persuade themselves that wind and solar are somehow better than the reliable power stations they're demolishing. It's only because they've been brainwashed into believing it by environmental groups and renewable energy companies, both with their feet in the taxpayer-funded trough. None of this nonsense would even be necessary if the ignorant politicians just built nuclear power stations. But they won't here in Australia because they are scientifically illiterate and, nuclear scary. In order to get the already unreliable and intermittent solar and wind power to the rest of the grid requires massive amounts of interconnection infrastructure, especially in a country like Australia, where the majority of the population lives on the coast, and yet the wind and solar factories are usually located huge distances inland. So it's hardly surprising that this grid bottleneck means that there's often too much solar power and the panels need to be turned off, because the tangle of grid connections can't cope. Solar farms forced to switch off as poles and wire delays hamper renewable transition. Major solar farms will be forced to shut off more than 1/3 of the power they generate by 2027 due to a dismal issue. Some major solar farms in Australia's southeast will be forced to shut off up to 2/3 of the power they generate by 2027 as delays in building poles and wires causes major bottlenecks, the energy regulator has warned. The Australian government has set a target of 82% renewable energy by 2030, from 35% in 2023, and a 43% reduction in carbon emissions. The Australian energy market operator, AEMO, has previously laid out a $122 billion blueprint known as the Integrated System Plan (ISP) for the country's electricity grid to achieve that goal without major disruption as ageing coal-fired generators are taken offline. New South Wales Erring coal plant will cease operations in 2027, followed by Victoria Yallourn coal plant in 2028. But AEMO has warned that delays and cost blowouts for a number of major transmission projects, particularly in Victoria, will severely curtail the amount of energy generated by renewable energy projects over the next 2 years. While some locations have not seen heavy congestion historically, they are nearing their current network limits, and additional capacity may result in new areas of congestion, AEMO's 2025 Enhanced Locational Information Report published on Wednesday said. Major transmission projects facing delays include the $3.3 billion VNI West, a 500 kilovolt double circuit transmission line connecting the New South Wales and Victorian energy grids, the 700 kilometre Energy Connect line between South Australia and New South Wales, and the 190 kilometre Western Renewables link from Western Victoria to Melbourne. AEMO's analysis found no major solar farms in Victoria or South Australia were forecast to have a shut-off rate of less than 35% by 2027, with that figure as high as 65% for some projects. And this map just shows the problem: the tangle of grid connections required to integrate the thousands of wind turbines and thousands of acres of solar panels. But don't worry, renewable energy is the cheapest electricity there is, right? In 2024, over half of all grid-scale wind and solar generation experienced network-driven curtailment of less than 1%. Wind farms average 1.1% network curtailment, but this was as high as 4.8% for some units. However, for solar farms, curtailment averaged 4.5%, with several experiencing very high levels of curtailment above 25%. High curtailment was mainly concentrated in specific areas, particularly Western New South Wales and Northwest Victoria, and illustrates that most transmission lines did not experience significant congestion, AEMO said. The most severe network congestion arose in areas with high levels of generation connected in locations that were originally designed to service demand rather than supply. These high network congestion areas broadly overlap with the areas experiencing high levels of generation curtailment. Once again, I say, none of this would be necessary if we just abandoned wind and solar and the ridiculous level of grid infrastructure required to knit it all together and just built a few strategically placed nuclear power stations instead. And don't forget, wind and solar factories have a life expectancy of perhaps a quarter of a nuclear power station, if you're lucky. So every wind turbine and solar panel you see today, literally every single one of them, will need to be replaced in 20 years' time. And then again in another 20, and then again in another 20, and so on ad infinitum. Yet somehow this is the wonderful new green circular economy that we're being promised. Thanks very much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any tips or stories, go there. If you'd like to watch another video, go there. If you'd like to buy me a coffee, go there. And please subscribe to the channel.